There is a sound that does something to the human nervous system that no other mechanical noise can replicate. It isn't subtle, it isn't refined, it doesn't ask for your attention politely. It takes it. A V8 engine at full throttle, the right V8, built the right way, with nothing between its exhaust and the open air except a few inches of pipe, produces a sound that bypasses rational thought entirely. It goes straight to something older, something instinctive, something that existed in human beings long before automobiles did. Engineers have spent decades trying to explain it scientifically. Frequency ranges, harmonic resonance, exhaust pulse timing, all of it technically accurate, none of it remotely sufficient. Because you don't analyze that sound, you feel it. In some V8 engines, a specific, extraordinary, unrepeatable handful produce sounds so violent, so visceral, and so permanently unforgettable that the people who have heard them in person carry the memory for the rest of their lives. These are those engines, the loudest, most aggressive, most acoustically extraordinary V8s ever built. The ones that didn't just power cars, they announced them. If the sound of a great V8 belongs in your world, hit that like button right now. And tell us in the comments, what is the greatest sounding V8 you have ever heard in person? Because that answer is always worth reading. We begin where any honest conversation about V8 sound has to begin, with an engine that didn't just sound loud, it sounded alive. The 426 HEMI, Chrysler's hemispherical combustion chamber V8, the engine that NASCAR banned, that insurance companies feared, and that drag racers worshipped, produced a sound unlike anything before or since in American automotive history. The physics behind it were straightforward. Hemispherical combustion chambers produce a faster, more complete burn. The large valves breathe deeply on both intake and exhaust cycles. The result is an engine that doesn't just exhaust combustion gases, it expels them with a velocity and a rhythm that creates something genuinely musical in its aggression. At idle, a HEMI with open exhaust produces a loping, uneven cadence that sounds almost lazy, almost relaxed. Don't be fooled. That irregular idle is the sound of an engine with an aggressive camshaft, lobes ground to maximize high RPM performance at the deliberate cost of low-speed smoothness. Then, the throttle opens. The idle disappears instantly. What replaces it is a sound that has been described by drivers, journalists, and bystanders in almost identical terms across 60 years of documentation. Explosive, violent, impossibly loud for something without forced induction, distinct from every other V8 ever built. There is a reason the word HEMI entered the American vocabulary as a synonym for raw power. You could hear why before you could see the engine badge. But here is what most people don't know about V8 sound engineering. Loudness alone is not what makes a great sounding engine. Volume without character is just noise. What separates the legendary V8 sounds from everything else is the specific combination of frequency, rhythm, and harmonic complexity that makes a particular engine instantly recognizable, even at a distance, even through walls, even in the middle of other noise. The 1960s Ford 427 SOT, the single overhead cam engine that NASCAR banned before it ever raced, produced a sound so distinctive that experienced mechanics could identify it from across a pit lane. The overhead cam configuration allowed the valvetrain to operate with a mechanical precision that pushed the engine's acoustic signature into frequencies that conventional pushrod V8s simply couldn't reach. High, sharp, almost metallic at high RPM, but underneath the high-frequency edge was a deep, chest-compressing bottom end that reminded you exactly how much displacement was doing the work. The 427 SOT never competed in NASCAR. It never got the mainstream exposure it deserved. But the people who heard it running, really running, at full throttle on a racetrack, describe the experience in terms that sound more like a sensory event than a mechanical observation. Now we move to an engine whose sound defined an entire decade of American motorsport. The Chevrolet LS7, 7 liters of naturally aspirated V8. 505 horsepower, 0 forced induction, 0 electronic assistance to fill in the gaps that displacement and mechanical engineering couldn't cover on their own. What made the LS7 sound so extraordinary wasn't just its volume, it was its honesty. Forced induction engines, turbocharged and supercharged V8s, produce sounds that are partly mechanical and partly the sound of air being compressed and expelled through additional hardware. The turbo whistle, the supercharger whine. These sounds are exciting, but they are additions to the engine's natural voice. The LS7 had none of that. What you heard was exactly what the engine was doing. Every combustion event, every valve opening and closing, every exhaust pulse traveling down a tube designed with the singular purpose of letting that sound escape as efficiently as possible. At high RPM, above 6,000 where the LS7 truly came alive, the sound crossed from loud into something that demanded a different vocabulary. It wasn't a roar, it was a scream, a sustained mechanical scream that carried information about what the engine was doing in real time. Drivers who campaigned LS7-powered Z06 Corvettes in competition described learning to read the engine through sound alone, hearing subtle changes in its acoustic signature that communicated throttle response, load, and mechanical health more immediately than any instrument. But here's what nobody tells you about the loudest factory V8 sound ever produced in an American street car. It didn't come from a Corvette. It didn't come from a Charger or a Mustang, or any of the celebrated names that dominate the muscle car conversation. It came from a Dodge Viper. The Viper's V10, technically not a V8, but built on the same pushrod, naturally aspirated philosophy that defined American V8 engineering, produced a sound so aggressively loud that multiple international motorsport venues imposed specific restrictions on Viper competition entries. Not because the car was too fast, because the engine was too loud. At full throttle, a Viper with its standard exhaust system exceeded the noise limits that European racing circuits had established for the comfort of surrounding communities. Track officials at circuits in England and Germany documented Viper sound levels that surpassed everything else in the paddock, including purpose-built race cars running competition exhaust systems. A street-registered sports car, louder than race cars, banned not for speed, but for sound. If that isn't a statement of engineering intent, nothing is. We cannot discuss the loudest V8s ever built without acknowledging what happens when American V8 engineering meets forced induction without restriction. The supercharged 6.2-liter LS9 that powered the C6ZR1 Corvette produced 638 horsepower through a Roots-type supercharger that sat prominently in the engine bay, visible through the transparent panel in the hood, as both an engineering statement and a visual provocation. The sound was unlike anything naturally aspirated. The supercharger added a mechanical whine that sat above the engine's natural exhaust note, a high-pitched, almost electronic overlay that gave the LS9 an acoustic signature instantly distinguishable from every other V8 in production. At full throttle, the combination of the supercharger whine and the exhaust note from 638 horsepower of displacement created something that journalists struggled to describe in conventional automotive language. One widely cited contemporary review noted that the LS9 at full throttle produced a sound that made nearby car alarms activate spontaneously. That is either a problem or a feature. In the context of a ZR1, it is clearly a feature. The Ford 5.2-liter Voodoo engine deserves its own chapter in any serious discussion of V8 acoustics. Built for the Shelby GT350 Mustang, the Voodoo was a flat-plane crankshaft V8, a configuration more commonly associated with European exotic sports cars than American muscle. The flat-plane crank fundamentally changes the firing order, and therefore the exhaust pulse pattern of the engine. The result was a V8 that sounded nothing like a V8 was supposed to sound. At high RPM, and the Voodoo revved to 8,250 RPM, an almost incomprehensible number for a pushrod less American V8, the sound was rawer, sharper, and more aggressive than anything Ford had previously produced for a street car. It drew direct comparisons to Ferrari's V8 sound signature. Not in volume, the Voodoo was louder, but in character. Ford engineers had deliberately designed an American V8 to sound European, and then made it louder than the Europeans would ever allow. Here is what all of these engines have in common beneath their individual acoustic identities. They were all built by engineers who understood, consciously or instinctively, that sound is not a byproduct of performance. Sound is part of the experience. Sound communicates information about mechanical events happening faster than the human eye can follow. The loudest V8s ever built were loud because they were honest. Every decibel was real. Every frequency was earned. Every sound was the direct acoustic consequence of combustion events happening in real time in real metal, with no electronic mediation between the engine and the human ear. That honesty, that complete. You didn't just hear these engines, you understood them. And understanding them, really understanding them, changed how you thought about what a car could be. What is the greatest sounding V8 you have ever heard? In person, on a track, or through an open pipe at a drag strip? Drop it in the comments. We want the stories, not just the names.